hope is you.
My only hope
Jesus,
is you.
my only hope.
My hope is you, Lord.
Hey boys and girls, welcome to Wednesday night Bible class. It's great to see you once again, and I am so excited to get into our next lesson. But first, I want to remind you of our memory verse for this particular month. Now, that's going to change for next month, so remember that, and I hope that you have been practicing it with your mom and dad. But for our memory verse, you need to go to Mark chapter 12, verses 30 through 31, and I'll have that up on the screen as we look at it together. Mark chapter 12, verses 30 through 31 says, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Obviously, those are some pretty important commandments that Jesus has given us about love, and that being a very important thing when it comes to our faith. And so I hope that we will continue to practice love with one another. Our song that we're going to do tonight is one that's really one of my favorites to do, and I don't think I've done it yet. It's been a real long time since I've sang this song, but we're going to sing the song Roll the Gospel Chariot. So I may want to back up a little bit because there are some hand movements to this that you have to remember, okay? And so I want you all to do this song with me. It's got a really good message about how we treat other people, which fits with our theme really, really well and fits with our scripture really, really well. So the first thing that I want you to do is start to roll the wheels of your chariots, okay? Just like this. Start rolling the wheels of your chariots, and that's the main thing that you need to remember, okay? So let's start singing together. Roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, and we won't tag along behind. If a friend is in the way, we will stop and pick them up. If a friend is in the way, we will stop and pick them up. If a friend is in the way, we will stop and pick them up, and we won't tag along behind. Roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, and we won't tag along behind. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick them up. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick them up. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick them up, and we won't tag along behind. Roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, and we won't tag along behind. If the devil's in the way, we will run right over him. If the devil's in the way, we will run right over him. If the devil's in the way, we will run right over him, and we won't tag along behind. Roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, roll the gospel chariot along, and we won't tag along behind. All right, boys and girls, great job. How many of you boys and girls have ever dreamed about having 3 wishes? I'm sure that just about all of us have, haven't we? That would be so neat for somebody to say, name 3 things that you want, and you can have any of those things, and you can have any of those things forever. That's why we really, really love shows and movies that have a genie in a lamp, don't we? Especially whenever I think about this movie. This is one of my favorite Disney movies ever made. And I know that they just did a live action remake of this movie. It's really good, but I don't necessarily think that it's as good as this particular one. The animated movie is so awesome and so great, and the genie in it is just hilarious. I love Robin Williams as the voice of the genie. But I want you to think about this particular story and what happens in this movie. You have someone that's considered to be a homeless street rat, as they call him, because he always steals his food, he doesn't have any money, and he doesn't even have a place to live. Well, he gets an opportunity by a really bad man, of course, to go in search of a lamp. And when he goes down into the Cave of Wonders and he finds that lamp, he gets closed inside of that cave, but the genie comes out and helps him to escape. And the genie gives him 3 wishes. Well, what do you notice about what happens with the wishes that he's made, if you've seen the movie or if you've read the book? It's the fact that even with those three wishes that made Aladdin rich, it got him into the palace, and virtually it gave him anything that he could possibly ever want. It never really brought him happiness, did it? What brought him happiness was doing things on his own and being honest. Being honest and not lying, because he did a whole lot of lying in the movie, and every time he did that, he would set himself back. He would go backwards. He ended up, making Jasmine not like him as much whenever he would lie. And so he basically could only get where he needed to be by recognizing where he was wrong and then coming back to himself and being himself once again. And this is very similar to a story that we find in the New Testament in Luke chapter 15. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells a parable of the prodigal son. Now, the word prodigal, we aren't really familiar with that name or that term, are we? We just know that it's part of a Bible story. But what that word prodigal means and what it encompasses basically is a return. And so I want us to think about that story for just a moment. You can find this particular story in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. And I know that that's a lot of verses to read, and we're not going to read every single one of those, but I want us to think about this story for just a moment and what it's all about. In the story of the prodigal son, you had a really wealthy and rich father that had 2 sons. And both of those sons were going to be given an inheritance upon the death of the father. Okay, so that was something that they were going to have to wait for toward the end of their life. Well, the youngest son, he was bored about where he was and he didn't want to stay home. And so he begged and he pleaded for his daddy to give him his inheritance now. So after all the begging and pleading, his father told him that he could have it, and he gave it to him. But whenever the young son left, he wasted all of that money. He bought things that he didn't need. He spent it on going out and doing a lot of things that he shouldn't have been doing. And then, guess what? All of that money ran out, didn't it? It all ran out, and he didn't have any more. As a matter of fact, the son came to a realization of how wrong he had been by taking the money early and how wrong he had been by using the money whenever he found himself with a job feeding pigs slop, and he would even eat that same food with the pigs. Isn't that disgusting? He was eating all of the trash and all of the junk that man would throw out and would feed to the pigs. As he was feeding the pigs, he would eat the same food. How many of us would eat food that we got out of our mom or dad's sink or garbage disposal or out of the trash? Don't be going in the garbage disposal, because that's dangerous. You don't want to do that. But how many of us would dig food out of our trash and eat it? No, we wouldn't do that. That's disgusting. Well, that's what he was having to do because he was so poor at the time. And he said, you know what? Even my father's servants have it better than I do. I would be better off just to go back home. I wonder if my father would take me back as a servant. I wonder if he would take me back as a slave. So the young man, he returns home, not knowing if his daddy was going to accept him, but very willing just to become one of his slaves so he could have it better than he had before. And as his daddy saw him coming home, I just want to read what his daddy said. Take a look. If you do have a Bible, I hope that you use a Bible if you have one, but take a look at Luke 15, verses 22 through 24. Luke 15, verses 22 through 24. Let's read that together as I have it up on the screen. It says, "But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate." Now, is that what we were expecting the father to do? We were probably expecting the dad to kind of be a little bit angry, right? Like, "Where have you been? I've been so worried about you. Why did you go off like that? Why did you go away?" No, his daddy was so excited to see him again and to have him back that he threw a celebration for him. Isn't that awesome? Well, did you know that our God feels the same way about us? There's some times where we kind of leave God, don't we? We go away from God. Maybe think about some ways in which we leave God or go away from him. Do we sometimes do it by the things that we say? Absolutely. Do we get away from God sometimes by how we treat people? Do we get away from God by some of the things that we do? Absolutely. But did you know that even though we get away from God sometimes out of our own selfishness, sometimes we're selfish and we say, "God, I just want to do what I want right now." And then we realize, I shouldn't have done that. That was really silly of me to do. That was not good of me to do. God always lets us come back. And whenever we come back to God, he always wants to celebrate. Did you know that with just one sinner that comes back to God, the angels in heaven rejoice? God throws a party every time somebody comes back to God. And he would do the same thing for you. Isn't that just a wonderful and an awesome story? I hope that you understand that God loves you, and he is our Father, and he would always take us back and welcome us back. I love you guys, and I hope that you'll do the activities that we have for you at the end of this. And don't forget that our memory verse is at the very end. If you ever have any questions, or if you ever want to talk to me about any of our lessons, you're always free to let me know. I love you guys, and we will see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.